the Georgian ex-president, Salome Zourabichvili. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
She's now taken up a fellowship at Arizona State University. What I
Good.
thought was kind of interesting about this, though, is that we saw Victoria Nuland, who's now became, I don't know, a fellow at Columbia University
Right.
alongside Hillary Clinton is
Yeah.
there. And I'm wondering, is there just some type of, is this proof that the university system in the United States is almost like an extension of the State Department? You know, with State
Yeah.
Department officials
Yeah.
that don't succeed, they get sent. And now I'm looking at universities differently now. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what is this? I thought this was
Right.
a place where we're just supposed to learn and question things. And now
Yeah.
I'm like,
Right. Yeah. Well, I remember, I mean, there was a very popular bumper sticker when I was young. I saw it all over Berkeley, and that was question authority. And there, even back then, it was, I think at least, it wasn't clear that, like the Berkeley types were really questioning authority. It was just certain types of authorities. It was old authority, and could be very, very obedient to new authority. But that's a whole separate issue. But quite certainly when I was young, universities were considered hotbeds of dissent. And that was true, I think, like up even, through the 90s. Certainly, like the anti-war movement was kind of grew out of the universities. There was real opposition to, there was opposition to like CIA recruitment efforts on university campuses and that kind of thing. The CIA was not welcome. And I think, what you're pointing to shows that that's all changed. It's just like now the academy, the universities and the larger establishment, let's say the government and corporations as well, they're all one. They think with one mind. It's the same people that move back and forth between them. No longer are these universities, islands of dissent. They're just sort of tools of the establishment. And I think that's it's a consequence of what Antonio Gramsci, he was a Marxist thinker, an Italian Marxist thinker, called the long march through the institutions. That is that, he said that he proposed like the way to carry out the revolution was not through, an armed insurrection, but rather through taking over various leading institutions within a country. And that's what happened. So the left began this long march back in the 60s. And, since then, they really have transformed the country. Now, in the same time, they've transformed themselves, I think, in a way, because it's not the same left that I remember when I was young. Maybe it's just what happens. Like when you take control of the reins of power, you can take control, for example, of the Pentagon. Then you stop being against wars because they're your wars. It's your military power. It used to be, it was those old, the military power belonged to the old fogies. And, so we hate the military. Now that it's our military, we love it and don't you dare criticize it. I think that's what you're saying.
can these institutions be saved or are they just lost?
Well, I've heard people propose, like on the dissident right, that we got to start our own long march. And I suppose that could happen. I just don't see any signs of that happening, to be honest. It takes more than a few individuals. It has to be a whole generation. And, that's what you had in the 60s, a whole generation. They adopted this new ideology and then went on to become professors and to become, State Department employees and to work for leading law firms and eventually, through this change of generations, those places were transformed.
Have we seen this as kind of a cycle? Have these institutions previously, like Harvard or whatever, that they've gone through and become corrupted and then got fixed, cleaned up, and then become corrupted again? Or are we in a unique phase where these institutions are all captured?
It's a history I don't know well enough to give a real definitive answer. But, there's no question that there was, let's say, in the 50s and earlier, there was less friction between the universities and leading other leading institutions of the country. It was in the 60s that the universities first became radicalized, and they became the hotbeds of dissent. I think there was they had a reputation for being providing sanctuary to dissenting thinkers, but it just wasn't on the scale that you saw in the 60s beforehand. It's just something that I'd have to look at more closely to give you a real definitive answer.